I just really, really try to have fun writing it and clarity writing it, because when you have fun and you have clarity when you're writing it, it's gonna come through on the page.
Hey folks, Brian Smith here with DreamPath Podcast, where we get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. Today we talk to screenwriter Zack Ford. Zack graduated from the prestigious New York University's Tisch School of Arts in their screenwriting program, and 2 weeks after graduating, sold his first screenplay. It was originally called Scribbleface, but when it was produced, it was called Scar 3D. It was the first stereoscopic 3D horror movie. And it didn't do so well with critics and fans, other than being #1 in Russia and also Finland. It received a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the reason that's an interesting point to remember in this interview is that Zack had to figure out a way, after that film did not do very well, to be taken seriously in the industry. And the way he did that was he hacked into Hollywood. And he actually wrote an article about this in Script magazine, which I'm putting in my show notes. And we talk a little bit about this in the interview, how he created a fake agency, how he posed as his own manager or agent, and wrote screenplays under pen names for many years. And his most recent film, Watcher, which premiered at Sundance last week, was written under a pen name. And so there's a lot of intrigue, and the journey that this film and Zack went on to finally get made is pretty remarkable. Zack is one of the most passionate, hustling screenwriters I have ever met. I've interviewed quite a few screenwriters on this show, but he really takes the cake in terms of how much drive this guy has. He writes about 6 screenplays per year consistently, and he is in it to win it. He really has passion for this craft. And that's what I love about Zack and talking to him and learning about his story. This film is great. I've watched about 10 or 12 Sundance films, and it really stands out as having a solid thriller foundation. But there's some elements to it that really make it unique and kind of break the mold in terms of what thrillers do these days. And I'm really excited that Zack was able to get into Sundance, one of the most preeminent film festivals in the world. And I'm really hoping that this is going to launch his career in an exciting direction. Can't wait to see what he does next. So without further ado, let's jump into my chat with screenwriter Zack Ford. Zack Ford, welcome to DreamPath Podcast.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really exciting to be part of the build-up to the Sundance Film Festival, which started today, coincidentally. So congrats on getting a film into Sundance.
Thank you very much.
So are you currently in, and forgive me if I mispronounce the name, Skaneateles, New York?
I am not in Skaneateles.
Or Skaneateles. Okay.
There's a lot of, the jury's still out on how exactly to pronounce it, to be honest with you. But right now I'm in Beverly Hills.
Oh, right on. Yeah, good for you.
Great guitars, by the way.
What's that?
I see a banjo and some really in a 12-string.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I got a Taylor 12 string and a banjo I inherited from my dad and still haven't really learned to play.
Might I ask what brand the acoustic guitar is over your right shoulder?
There's a Martin. It's a limited edition Martin 6-string right here.
Very nice.
And then here is right behind me is a Gibson F-hole, and I forget the model number, but it's like an early 90s Gibson that goes out of tune way too often. But it's a cool sounding guitar, hollow body, and a little ukulele here to the right, and just kind of my musical sanctuary where I get away from my kids and my grandkid.
Very nice.
Yeah. So Watcher, what a journey this screenplay has been on, and what a journey you've been on to get this thing actually produced. I read up on it, and your story in Screenwriting magazine was quite harrowing. Can you tell us how many years it took from the time that you typed that first word on your screen or wrote that first word on your legal pad, outlining it, how long it took to get to this point?
Quite a while. I remember I came up with the title for the script in 2016, I believe. I was living in Manhattan, and then I moved to Brooklyn, and I had a very simple idea of people looking through windows. As you can imagine, if you've ever been to New York City, no matter what apartment you're staying in, you can always inadvertently at least find yourself looking into someone else's apartment. And I wrote it 2016, I believe, right at the end of 2015, maybe 2016, and wrote it rather quickly, to be honest with you. In a few days, I had a very clear conception of the characters and the idea and the plot. And I was at the time writing about 6 screenplays a year. And you mentioned the Script magazine article from last year. I was pretending to be my own manager. I was writing as quickly as I could, being as prolific as I could, sending out screenplays under my own under pen names while trying to sell them as a manager. And I didn't really think much of Watcher at the time because it seemed so simple. But then I started to realize when I sent it out, people really responded to that. It was, and then it was optioned rather quickly. But to answer your question, from fade in to this premiere at Sundance, 5 years.
Wow. So there's a couple of things I want to unpack there. Your process of writing 6 screenplays per year under pen names. I understand why you wrote under a pen name because I read your article in Script magazine, which was fantastic. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that article.
Thank you.
But can you tell listeners why you were using a pen name as opposed to your name? Because you have a lot of street cred coming in as a screenwriter with Tisch, New York, Tisch School of Arts, training as a screenwriter, and already having, one at least produced screenplay that made it to film. Actually, 2. So you had Scar, which was previously Scribbleface, right?
Right.
Kind of made it big in Russia and in Europe. And then you had Girls' Night Out, which you wrote and directed. So why the pen names?
I was in about 2012 to 2016. I was in a very unusual place. As you said, I had cred, but some cred. I'd graduated from NYU several years earlier. I was a double major at Tisch. I'd sold my thesis screenplay, which became, as you said, Scar 3D, which was the world's first stereoscopic 3D film to hit theaters. It was a good thing, but the movie itself didn't really do too well, even though it had a strange path of, for instance, being #1 in Russia. But the script didn't do too well. Then the industry started to change. There was the writer's strike. There was new media. Agents and managers started looking at less material, started putting up more walls. I'd shot an independent feature, I guess, as you would call maybe a directorial debut, which I probably should have shot as a short. I was still cutting my teeth and learning. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. So here I was, a produced screenwriter. I had credits, but I didn't have representation. And even though I knew that I was writing and getting better and better at my craft, I couldn't. It was the catch-22 of needing rep to get rep, needing a manager to get an agent, needing an agent to get a manager. I'd parted ways with, I think it was Paradigm a couple of years earlier, and I was kind of in a strange lurch. And I knew something needed to be done. I needed to hack back into the industry because I'd been kind of pushed out of it for a couple of years. It can be a fickle place. So that's why I created this hack, if you will, of getting an answering machine, making up my company name, which was Barbaric, using my own name as a manager. As I said, I'd been in a lurch for a couple of years, so people didn't really know who I was. So I was able to do that. People were under the impression that I made a pivot. And that way I could appear like I was writing so many screenplays, I could appear like I had a stable of writers. If people passed on a script or didn't like a romantic comedy I'd written, I could just put a new name on it, and it would look like I had a new writer. So people weren't, I wasn't wearing out any one brand too quickly. And that way I could also do reconnaissance about what people wanted, and learn about also straight from the producers and agents or whoever, what they were looking for. And I did that for about 3 years, probably sent out about a dozen different screenplays, maybe 18, had a call sheet that was about 138 pages long. And after honing my writing to make it more commercial, after I started seeing more clearly the targets that I had to hit to sell projects, I finally optioned Watcher.
Wow. So did you ever get caught with, this, I hesitate to call it a ruse, but, this fake company and, posing as your own manager and using pen names? Did anybody ever call you out on it?
No one ever called me out. No one ever did. I knew that when I knew ultimately, if I succeeded, I would lower the veil and say surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened with Watcher. And the reaction of people who'd read my work, I ended up sending the Script magazine article to everyone I'd made contact with. And the reaction was positive. They still read my work. And yeah.
Yeah. So you're asking for forgiveness rather than permission, and because you did option Watcher, it worked out, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's cute,"
and it became part of the story too.
Yeah, it definitely did. Tell us about Watcher. I have not seen it, and it's kind of unusual for me to do interviews for films that I haven't seen yet, but it's under lock and key, I understand, until its premiere at Sundance.
It's under lock and key until tomorrow at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, where it'll have its virtual premiere at Sundance. I haven't seen the completed movie, but I saw a picture lock, which was pretty much the entire movie before I think the score and some visual effects and some additional dialogue recording were put in. And it looks really good. I'm very excited. It was interesting to see, as you can imagine, the scenes and set pieces I'd written on the screen, and I'm very excited.
So, can you give us the elevator pitch or the log line for the movie?
Absolutely. So, a married couple move into a new apartment. It happens to take place in Bucharest. And upon moving, it's this American couple, upon moving into this new apartment building, the wife begins to suspect that someone in an adjacent building is looking through their window into their window. So there's this creeping paranoia. And as she becomes more and more convinced that she's being watched from this adjacent apartment across the street, there's also a serial killer on the loose. And that's I guess that's kind of the first act. That's the setup. That's where it picks up. Yep.
Nice. So I'd like to go back to the option, the first option of the screenplay. Was Chloe Okuno attached at that time as director?
When it was optioned?
Yeah.
No, Chloe came on, I believe, after the second. It was optioned 2, maybe 3 times. And I believe she was attached after the second option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it was optioned the first time, that was pre-COVID, right?
It was optioned pre-COVID. it was optioned a second time pre-COVID. And then it was going to go into production. Wow, all the years are blurred. Right when that week when everyone began to know the name COVID, that was right in March of 2020, right?
Right. Yeah.
That
February,
week,
March.
that week when everyone heard the word coronavirus for the first time, the Watcher was set to go into production, and there were the press releases. It's going into production. It's going into production, and then it was shut down that very same week. And it was wait 1 year. We'll see what happens in a year. I couldn't believe it. It was an up and a down.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
you were
then
expecting a paycheck too, right? For your option fee?
yeah, that didn't really have a lot to do with it. I believe at that point the screenplay had been bought, but all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, and it was ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was even cast at that point, if I'm not mistaken. And then it was, no one knew what was going to happen. That was back when they were saying, oh, COVID will be maybe a 2 or 3 week shutdown. And then it ended up being exactly 1 year.
Mm-hmm. So when it goes back into production, I imagine that's a huge sigh of relief for you because of how crazy the industry is and how people just move on from projects. It was totally possible that it was never going to be made.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's I'll finally be completely relaxed about it when I finally see the movie tomorrow. You never know what's going to happen.
You're still on
Then,
the edge of your seat,
then I'll
waiting,
finally let my body relax as soon as I see those closing credits.
waiting for the next shoe to drop. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what was the process like once Chloe got involved in terms of collaboration and rewrites?
I wasn't on the set. I was actually running for mayor of my hometown in upstate New York,
Mm-hmm.
right as the film went into production. But it was interesting to see all the scenes that I'd written end up uh, in the movie. It was great. I think Chloe did a great job.
Yeah. So in terms of the idea that you had going into screenwriting, and I know from reading about you that you started very young. I think age 6 is when you saw your first, your first like formatted stage play / screenplay in Courier font, and then you wrote your first screenplay at the age of 12, which is insane. I mean, that's just an incredible amount of vision and drive for someone that age. But your ideas going in were obviously shaped by what was happening in the industry, probably in the 80s and 90s. How different was it when you actually jumped in and tried to become a screenwriter? And I know you got that first sale right out of Tisch, which must have been amazing. But was there a pretty shocking difference in the reality versus what you thought it would be?
Of course. When I was 12, that was the 90s. Hollywood was very different. It was the age of the big spec sales. Studios were buying everything. They were buying ideas for a lot of money. I got into writing screenplays because my mom had actually written a screenplay that was a finalist in the Austin Heart of Film Festival.
Hmm.
So when I was 12, I was 12. I wasn't thinking about writing screenplays. I knew I liked movies. But then when my mom was a finalist, my family ended up going to the Austin Film Festival. And I got to, see my mom's screenplay read aloud by actors. And it really hit me. Oh, like this is where movies come from. This
Nice.
is, and I saw my mom's screenplay. And then I was like, well, hey, I want to try that. I was always kind of like a verbal kid. I liked writing. And I remember at 12, I wrote I just started writing. I think my first screenplay that I ever wrote was about a president of the United States who goes into Walter Reed for an operation, and some terrorists see that as an opportunity to kidnap him.
That's a great premise. I like it.
Yeah, but that was me at 12.
Hmm.
Uh,
And then at age 16, you entered a screenplay into Nicholl's, which is like one of the premier screenwriting competitions in the country, isn't it?
that's right. That's right. Once I was kind of hooked at that point, and I believe Greg Beale was the director or something of the Nicholl at that point, or involved. And I remember I placed pretty highly, and I got a rejection letter, but he'd written a handwritten note on it, telling me that the script that I'd written had done pretty well in the competition. And once I got that, then I was really hooked because I said, okay, if I keep working, if I keep honing my craft, I can keep moving up.
Hmm. So it sounds like it was in your blood from a very early age. And then was Tisch, when you went to Tisch in New York, very hard school to get into, um, and one of the most preeminent programs in the country. Was your focus still screenwriting, or were you looking at a broader education in film and the arts?
I uh, I went for screenwriting. I dabbled in playwriting. Ended up double majoring in film. My college career was a strange one because I arrived from upstate New York in New York City in 2001 as an undergraduate, and I got to college 1 week before September 11th.
My goodness.
So it was my first time in a big city ever. I never even visited New York before. I didn't know what the World Trade Center was, but I was working as a journalist for an upstate paper called the Auburn Citizen. The summer before I went to college, I was a correspondent. I was writing a bunch of articles about things going on upstate. So I covered it and took pictures and essentially became a photojournalist with the pictures about what was going on. So from that point on, the 4 years I spent at NYU were very different from, I think, an average college experience. We were that class who'd gone through that together.
Hmm.
So we were kind of cut slack by the administration. Like we had, we were traumatized,
Hmm.
and but we were writers, so we kind of got through it.
So you come out of Tisch and then you sell Scribbleface, which becomes Scar, and it gets 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. No,
Yeah.
but how does that feel when the product that you wrote, at least this is the way I understand how it unfolded, what you wrote doesn't look anything like what's actually on the screen. So there were so many changes apparently that your name is attached to this project that gets 0% of Rotten Tomatoes, a remarkable accomplishment.
you can really you can really see how on a project one vision that everyone believes in makes a good project. But I think that was really a time of confusion in the industry. So I'd written this script called Scribbleface. It was about 2007. New media was coming in. Movies like Saw and Hostel were crushing it at the box office. I'd written a campy supernatural zombie movie. There were many producers on the project. Some wanted to keep it that way. Others wanted to make it more of a torture porn film, which it wasn't when I originally wrote it. There was a lot of dissension and conversations and disagreements on what the movie should be. Some people thought it should be in 3D. Other people thought 3D was a gimmick all the way through production. Uh, and there were just so many disagreements on what the movie was supposed to be that when it finally came out, I think the result is a very kind of confused jumble
Hmm.
of what it was, of kind of a mess. So it was a huge, I was on set every single day. I was just out of college. I think it was like 22 or 23. But it was a big learning experience to be on set and watch the movie um, get get produced.
Yeah. Given that this was your first project, your first film that was being made, and that you were actually on set, did you realize how much of a jumbled mess it was at the time? Or was it actually when you saw it on screen, you're like, oh, wow, this is not what I was expecting?
I think I knew. I mean, everyone's intentions were good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, this was also the time of new media, so trends were moving even faster. I think some of the producers on the project who wanted to make it more of a slasher film like Saw were generally right, but they missed the trend. And I would say, yeah, there was a general confusion. There wasn't a cohesion
Mm-hmm.
on set. I don't think anyone's ideas were necessarily wrong, but when you put 10 producers and a director and a cinematographer and actors and me, a writer on a set who all have a different vision, uh, the result is going to get mangled.
I'd like to ask you about your process and what it takes to put out 6 screenplays per year. That seems pretty prolific for, from look the outside looking in. That seems like an amazing amount of work product. So what does your day look like, your week look like, and what is the workflow? Are you working on multiple screenplays at the same time, or are you just focused on one and then you move on to the next?
I do one at a time. But yeah, I'm obsessed. This is what I chose as a kid. It's what I love to do. And I'm always going to do it no matter what. There's been a lot of ups and a lot of downs, but I'll always do it.
Mm-hmm. Beyond Tisch, have you participated in any labs or workshops or anything like that? Or is it just once you left Tisch, you were on your own and cranking out the work?
Yeah, I've always been a self-starter, I guess. I don't have any strange routines. I just get up, I get a cup of coffee, and I do my writing.
Mm-hmm.
Have I ever been part of any labs? No. Have I been in any writer rooms? No, not yet. I think that would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some writing here with, especially with my manager Ben. We work on projects together. But we'll see. Maybe I'll be in a writer's room. I'd like
Yeah.
that. I think that would be fun.
Do you outline first?
More and more. Yeah. I think outlining is important. Um, I didn't used to, but I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry for the geek out, process questions, but as someone who, writes screenplays or is aspiring to write them, I'm curious about your process. The program that you use, Final Draft, Movie Magic Screenwriter, Celtics, what do you use?
Um, Final draft. Celtics is pretty good. I've taught some screenwriting classes, and yeah, I know students can use that. Final draft is what I usually use. But to go back and answer your question about process, yeah, I these days I won't write fade in. I won't go to final draft until I know the beginning, the middle, and the end,
Hmm.
even in broad, even in broad strokes, and I know at least three set pieces. There's
And a
like
set piece is what?
the scenes where once you know the premise and once you know the characters and once you generally know how the movie's going to feel, like an intuitive feeling about it, you start to see how like in Watcher, like before I wrote, I had an idea of a couple people moving in and being watched. And I let it simmer. Usually I'll just give myself a week to go to bed thinking about it and wake up thinking about it. And then for me, sometimes, what if scenes kind of pop.
Hmm.
And, what if she was followed into a movie theater that ended up in Watcher? What if she was being watched and, you know, she went into a grocery store and she thought she was being followed. What would that scene look like? And when I start to realize that there, because of the, dynamics of the setup, that could lead to these set piece scenes. And once I start to visualize and kind of get a notion for them, then I start putting pen to paper and outlining. Then I start putting out like fun scenes that I like to watch, even if I just write them down on a piece of paper and put a little box around them, even if I don't know where they're going to fit in the story. I know, like, oh, because you have to watch movies. You think like, oh, that's how that would feel. That's that kind of scene in that kind of movie with that kind of stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of look at them like Legos.
like you have some scenes, you write them down on paper, you put a box around them. Now they're like Legos. You can move them around, you can build with them. And
Hmm.
then the acts start to emerge and the structure starts to emerge. And then, you have to have little scenes of interstitial tissue. But, until I get the big swoops of some of the fun scenes, at least like as a flicker in my head where I can start to really feel them, I don't write, I wait. And I think that's like the thing that's made me improve as a writer is having that like patience. It's so much fun to just type fade in and just start writing. But I really try to hold back. And I find the more I hold back and not write until I'm really ready, the more antsy I get. And then the more my brain starts to fire. And then because my brain wants to get writing, it just starts like, I kind of hold myself hostage. And then my brain starts to develop new scenes and better scenes. And I try to hold back as long as I can. And then it's always worth it. Like it's always worth being patient. It's always worth doing another outline. It's always worth like sleeping on it for another day. And that ends up making actually writing the script a lot more fun because then you know where you're going when you're writing.
Yeah. How do you maintain focus during times of chaos where you have to get the work done, but there's just, you could doom scroll on social media for hours and hours and just,
Yeah,
it has to be tough in times of turmoil.
it is. I just I push myself hard, but I also don't. If the writing's not coming that day, I don't beat myself up. If I want to doom scroll and fuck around an app a little bit, like sure, I'll do that. But I try to more and more trust my intuition when I'm ready to actually write. When I'm ready to actually commit to writing the story. I've been hired for some rewrites. There are deadlines, but I sometimes it's a little difficult. But organization I think is key. As long as I try to turn off the phone and just go for a walk or whatever, and it usually works out.
So when you're writing, it sounds like a very solitary process, what you've just described. How soon do you bring in other opinions to look at your set pieces, to look at your outline, to make sure that, the ideas are crystallized enough to go to the next stage?
I wait at least until I know I've written a few good scenes or a few good takes. You don't want to expose it um, too early. I try to poke as many holes in it as I can beforehand, because it's hard to hear criticism. But I want to make sure that it's to a point where there's enough positives to where I know that it's going to start to people are going to start to see in it what I see in it.
Hmm.
I give the writing enough time to do it enough justice, to give it a good first impression.
Right. So when I was taking a painting class in college, one of the problems that I had was when to know when you're finished. The when is the next stroke one stroke too many, or with the brush? And how do you look at screenplays in that through that lens of when am I done? When is enough enough?
That's a really good question. I've ironically, I'm kind of a perfectionist, but I've learned to not be a perfectionist when it comes to screenwriting and really look at it as a malleable blueprint. I'm not trying to, I freed myself from trying to come up with the perfect scene or the perfect bit of dialogue, or the perfect character. And I've really come at it more in a fun, free form, splashy kind of way. If I'm going to write a script, I know that the necessities aren't perfection. The necessities are good characters with good scenes, with good stakes. And I just really, really try to have fun writing it, and clarity writing it. Because when you have fun and you have clarity when you're writing it, it's gonna come through on the page. And you can't get away with a lot. Like in a novel, you can write around some parts that are better than others.
You can't do that in a screenplay. So I know that if it's flowing to write, I know that people are going, it's going to translate to the reader. But the idea that there's something perfect, uh, yeah, kind of holds you back because other people are going to interpret it. The actors are going to interpret it. So I try to come up with the general, uh, the general structure, the general feel of what's supposed to happen with those characters, and I leave it open a little bit. Maybe there will be a rewrite, maybe something will change.
Right.
But as long as you have the forms, the structural forms in there, and the ingredients of just the basics, as long as the basics are in there, I I feel good because
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be reinterpreted. As long as there's good characters and you know what they want, um, it's always going to change. I don't look at it as like, a painting you want it perfect and then you put it in a frame, uh, and you look at it. But if you come at a screenplay as not all of your responsibility, there's so many other people who are going to come in and put the print on it. It frees you. It takes the pressure off.
So basically, done is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect, and
Yeah.
making sense is better than perfect,
Right.
and clarity is better than perfect.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So, where do you see the industry going for screenwriters like yourself in terms of having a sustainable profession where, what I've read about you, you have hustled over the last decade like no other screenwriter I've ever read about. I mean, the amount of effort that you put
Thank you.
into just getting your work seen and considered. And I mean, you're obviously so passionate about it, but it does not seem sustainable long term over the course of the next, 20, 30 years. So, and maybe it is. I mean, maybe I'm selling your hustle short, but
Oh, geez, now I'm nervous.
but it just seems like a lot. I mean, so much effort that goes into trying to get your work seen and then optioned and then made. But is there an avenue that you see for yourself that maybe is a little less tortuous, if that's a word, or agonizing, that maybe is more of a steady paycheck, like you could get a job in a writer's room on a television show? How hard or easy is that? Are you seeing more opportunities now that you have a film in Sundance to have options like that? And I know it's kind of a broad, ambiguous question, but I'm just wondering where you think your career is going now that you have achieved this level of notoriety.
You never know. All you can do. I've worked at 9 to 5 jobs in advertising, and it was nice for a while to have a steady paycheck. But after a couple months, I couldn't help it. I started, even when I was working in advertising, I just started writing screenplays at my desk again and shirking the advertising work because this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it no matter what. And I think all you can do is take the temperature of where the industry is, and what people want, and put in another variable of what you want to do as a writer, and keep working that calculus equation. And you never know what's going to happen. I think if you look through the whole history of Hollywood, everyone has ups and downs. It can be a very tumultuous business. But what I'm going to do is just keep hustling.
Yeah. Keep your head down, do the work, and not
Exactly.
not try to play a four-dimensional chess game, playing 10 moves ahead when there's no way you can conceivably think that far ahead. There's too many moving parts, it sounds like.
And the one thing that is a constant in all of the variables, and all of the unknowns is if you go back to the basics and write something that you care about, with good characters and good structure, it's something's going to give.
Yeah.
You can do that as long as you stay working on those lines. Doors will open.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. And such an admirable amount of just persistence that you have put into this whole journey. Yeah, it's amazing. So, what is next for you creatively? I know you're working with your manager, Ben, on some screenplays. Is there anything that we can look forward to maybe seeing come out in the next 6 months to a year?
I hope so. I'm currently in negotiations for a rewrite of a pretty big movie. We'll see where that goes. And Ben and I are working on a lot of stuff. There's a sports comedy in the works. There's some genre pieces. There's a thriller. There's another horror script I've written that's got a pretty big producer and a director attached to it. So we'll see what gives. Things happen real slow, and then things happen really quickly the next minute.
Right. And I know Watcher has been already picked up for distribution, right? By Cinetech, is that right? Or
they're handling the distribution, the sales. There was an article today, Deadline, that the writer believed that Watcher was one of 15 movies that would sell. So we'll see.
Right.
And the next big one is I'm hoping the next one I'm leading is as I mentioned, a sports comedy about ultimate frisbee, which I've been working on with Ben. So we'll see. It would be nice to change gears too. Mm-hmm. I do something maybe out of the horror box a little bit.
Yeah, almost like a dodgeball type of.
Exactly. Look at that. It pitches itself. You get it.
Yep. A dodgeball, but with ultimate frisbee.
With a flat ball. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Zack Ford, it was a pleasure to hear about your journey into film, and good luck with the premiere of Watcher.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreamPathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.